All right, welcome back to another episode of the Black Bullion Show. Something of a mass exodus is quietly occurring beneath the surface of the US economy. Now, during this process, don't be surprised if we find the foundations of our most beloved American cities shaken by this. Now, how will this impact the economy, you ask? Well, find out shortly. But first, if you're new to this channel, please hit that big red subscribe button right down below. Also, please hit the like button. It helps to get this economic evangelism right on out there to the masses to bring more people into precious metals. Okay, so Jim Rickards has a new article out entitled Depression and the Great American Exodus. Now, instead of solely focusing on the depression side of this article, I want to focus on the Great American Exodus side. So here is a quote from the article, just going to scroll down to it. And I quote: The Great American Exodus. Due to a combination of the Ronies spreading in densely populated areas, business failures, urban riots, and failing mayors and police departments, Americans are migrating from the big cities to suburban and country areas by the millions. American families are leaving dysfunctional cities such as New York City, Seattle, and San Francisco and heading for Montana, Colorado, Maine, and upstate New York and the Catskill Mountains, among other safe havens. Big cities have always offered a trade off between higher taxes and urban stress in exchange for entertainment, great restaurants, museums, and intellectual buzz. Today, the venues and buzz are gone. The crime rates are soaring, and all that is left is the stress and taxes. So, people are getting out. Changes like this are not temporary. Once people move out, they don't return, ever. Their children may return someday, but that could be 15 or 20 years away. And those who leave tend to have the most capital and the most talent. This leaves the cities as empty shells populated by oligarchs with personal bodyguards and the poor, who have to deal with the street level violence. This shift can be helpful for individuals who move, but it's devastating for the economics of major cities. And that's devastating for the US economy as a whole. It's one more reason we will be in depression for years, even if the technical recession is over soon. Now, how accurate is Jim's claim here? Well, Pew Research seems to confirm it. Now, here is a New York Times article outlining some of those details from that Pew Research. Um, New data sheds light on who is moving because of the Ronies. So let's get into it. Last month, surveyors with the Pew Research Center set out to answer a timely question: who is moving because of the Ronies and why? They found that about 3% of more than 9,600 respondents in the United States said that they had changed their residence because of the Ronies. And 6% said someone else had moved into their home. About 22% of respondents had either moved because of the Ronies or knew someone who did. Family was a major factor in people's decisions. Most of those who relocated said they had moved in with relatives. The survey also found that young people were disproportionately mobile. About 9% of adults ages 18 to 29 said they had moved because of the outbreak. Anecdotal evidence and news reports have already shown that the Ronies has spurred people to rethink their living situations. Campus shutdowns have pushed many college students back to their families' homes. School closings have forced parents to seek out relatives for help with childcare. Some people have made their vacation homes into primary residences. Others, facing job losses and evictions, are struggling to find shelter. The Pew data, released on Monday, sheds more light on the scope and scale of these migrations. It is too soon to tell how many of these moves will be permanent, in part because many people don't know when or whether their schools or workplaces will reopen. But it appears that some have relocated for good. About 9% of those who moved said they had bought or rented a new place. Of those who said they had moved because of the Ronies, 28% said that the biggest reason was to reduce their risk of infection. Other common reasons included college campus closures, a desire to be with family, and job losses. Okay, so we can be sure that the mass exoduses are occurring, but how will this impact economies? Well, there's a website called Payments, PYMNTS, and here's an article from them that can shed some light on that. So here's a quick highlight I'll read from them. However, the CEO said an eventual rebound seems in the cards for central business districts given US downtown area's history of resurgence even after events like 9/11. Still, he thinks such a resurgence could take 3 years. For now, the ripple effects are growing as people and firms leave urban areas. For example, the US Conference of Mayors says cities need as much as $250 billion to offset tax revenues lost to the Roni's economic slowdown. After all, the new normal of everyday life amid the Ronies had many people working and shopping digitally. I'm one of them. I've been doing that. Bad news for local businesses depend on foot traffic in densely populated areas. Payments has seen the creation of the fully digital consumer in just 12 weeks. At least some of the shifts will be long lived, perhaps permanent, especially when it comes to doing everything from home. For example, extrapolating a bit from our survey data indicates that 53 million of the 156.6 million US consumers who are eating at restaurants less often plan to place restaurant orders from home more often, and 24.7 million are simply done with dining out in restaurants altogether, even after the Ronies passes. Meanwhile, roughly 136.6 million consumers were grocery shopping less often than they did before the outbreak. And of that tally, 48.2 million plan to permanently do so less often even after the Ronies is over. Drill down even more, and 19.7 million US consumers will simply not go back to shopping for groceries in brick and mortar stores at all. And in fact, a full 32.5% of consumers shopping across retail are doing so online. Now, to add to that, I have some coworkers who have told me that, and I have coworkers who have um, uh, spouses with, the or the pre-existing conditions that could possibly hamper their health if they do get the Ronies. These guys have told me that they've been shopping via Amazon, I think through Whole Foods, and they get their food delivered to their home. So even with that, I mean, you can definitely see how brick and mortar grocery stores may be impacted negatively by this. So, if cities are will potentially struggle with tax revenues, so what? What's the big deal? Well, check this out. Now, this might be something that you guys might be aware of, but there is a connection between property taxes, for example, and pension funding. Um, Now, this comes from the pioneerinstitute.org, and I quote, a recent study from economist Evgenia Gorina, published in the journal State and Local Government Review, found a positive relationship between a local government's reliance on property taxes as a revenue source and how well funded their pensions are. In other words, local governments that rely heavily on property taxes as funding sources tend to have better funded pension programs. On the other hand, local governments that rely on intergovernmental aid, usually from state and federal governments, as a revenue source, have more precariously funded pensions. And for those of you who are not familiar with the American public pension crisis, then check this out from buckinghamadvisor.com. American pension crisis, how we got here. Here's a quote from the article. My adopted home of Charleston might have been ranked the best city in the world, but the state of South Carolina is earning a less distinguished label as a harbinger of the country's worst pension crises. And yes, that's crises, plural, because U.S., state, and local government pensions have unfunded liabilities estimated at more than $5 trillion in funding ratios of just 39%. What does that mean exactly? When a company or government pledges to pay its long-term employees a portion of their salary and retirement, a pension, the entity estimates how much it and its employees will need to set aside in order to make those payments in the future. An underfunded pension is one that simply doesn't have sufficient funds to make its promised future payments. Corporate pensions in the United States are in trouble, with the top 25 underfunded plans in the S&P 500 alone accounting for more than $225 billion in underfunding at the end of 2015. But state and municipalities are in even worse shape. This week, the Charleston-based Post and Courier estimated that South Carolina's shortfall alone was at $24.1 billion, more than triple the state's annual budget. Now, I'm not going to go into the details as to why this has happened. I'll leave this article in the description as well, so you guys can read into that and check that out. But essentially, this is a domino effect. And for the purposes of this video, I have only focused on one of those knock-on effects of this mass migration. Baby boomers are beginning to retire at faster rates as the generation begins to age into retirement. This could potentially be a perfect storm, well, another perfect storm that could hit the economy. So what are your guys' thoughts on this? When it comes to the mass migration, cities not having enough revenues, and how that could potentially hurt things such as public pension plans that soon-to-be retirees will need. Those are it's just crazy how much all of these things are just coming together all at once. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Thanks again for watching. Please hit that like button. Please subscribe. It's Black Bullion.